a todos. Estaremos empezando a las 10:05, solo para darle unos minutos a todos que nos acompañen. Y en eso, en lo que nos están acompañando, si ustedes hablan español y van a necesitar traducción en español, tenemos unas indicaciones para que ustedes puedan escuchar toda la presentación y la información en español. Sé que muchos de ustedes están conectados desde su teléfono. Si están conectados desde su teléfono, van a ver que aquí hay 3 puntitos a donde dice más. Y si le pueden dar un clic allá donde hay 3 puntitos más, seleccionar Language Interpretation, a donde dice interpretación del lenguaje. Y si tienen un iPhone. Si tienen un teléfono que no es un Android, es un Android, se va a ver como un globito. Y van a seleccionar español, Spanish, y también van a mover donde dice apagar el audio original, so va a decir mute, y tiene que estar como en seleccionado verde. Welcome, thank you for joining us, everyone. We're just, before we get started, we just want to make sure that our Spanish speakers have access to listening to the presentation in Spanish. We're trying to offer translation to everyone. So if you mind just waiting a couple of minutes before we get started and make sure that everyone is able to understand in Spanish. Otra vez, para los que nos acaban de acompañar y meterse en el Zoom en este momento, la presentación toda va a ser en inglés. Para ofrecer asistencia en español, necesitamos que si están conectados desde su teléfono o desde su computadora, que le den puntitos a donde hay un globito, si están desde su computadora, y van a seleccionar interpretación del lenguaje. Y si van a seleccionar la opción de español y ponerle silenciar el audio original para que no escuchen lo de inglés y lo de español al mismo tiempo. Si tienen preguntas, Raquel nos va a poder asistir en estar respondiendo preguntas. Y voy a parar mi pantalla un segundo para que conozcan quién es Raquel y le puedan mandar un mensaje. Raquel, do you want to go ahead and say hello to everyone just so they know who to ask for help during the presentation?
Yeah. Hola, buenos días. Me llamo Raquel y soy la coordinadora de Civic Engagement. Entonces, si necesitan ayuda hoy, pueden mandarme en el chat un mensaje. Ahí aparece Raquel Ketz. Me pueden mandar un mensaje y ya luego, si tienen problemas escuchando a Zoila, porque ella va a estar haciendo la translation, la traducción en español, me dejan saber también.
Let me just go through it one more time for anyone who's joining right now, and I'm going to share my screen. So, para cualquier persona que nos acaba de acompañar en estos momentos, gracias por acompañarnos el día de hoy. Sabemos que es un sábado y apreciamos que estén acompañándonos el día de hoy. Para recibir traducción, si están conectados desde su teléfono, le van a dar aquí a los 3 puntitos. Si no están conectados desde su teléfono, en la barra donde tienen para ponerle volumen para hablar, le van a dar clic a donde está como un globito que va a decir Language Interpretation o interpretación del lenguaje. Si están desde su teléfono, le tienen que dar a los 3 puntitos para accesar esta información desde un iPhone o desde un Android. Le van a dar seleccionar Spanish y van a poner en silencio el original audio para que no estén escuchando los 2 lenguajes de inglés y español. Si durante la presentación necesitan ayuda, por favor contacten a Raquel Setz para más información.
¿Zoila?
Y Zoila va a ser la que va a estar
Sí.
ayudando a dar la interpretación. Okay?
I could hear you. I don't think Karen can hear us.
Sí. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Karen Diaz, and I'm the Electoral Field Manager for the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights. I'm so excited to have you all joining us today. This is a really important next step as we have finished counting ourselves in the census. And I just would like to introduce today our executive director, Angelica Salas. She's widely regarded as one of the most gifted activists, organizers in the country today. When she became the executive director in 1999, she spearheaded several ambitious campaigns locally, statewide, and nationally, and her efforts to allow all Californians to obtain driver's licenses. Angelica is a leader and is a respected voice on immigration and advocacy and policy. And I just want to go ahead and pass it on to her so she can share with us the importance of redistricting and why we're gathered all here today.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you for everybody for being here. Buenos días a todos. Es un placer siempre estar con ustedes. Muchas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros hoy, ¿verdad? En esta audiencia que vamos a aprender más sobre la redistribución de distritos. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. Thank you for joining us to learn more about redistricting and the importance to our communities. This is an opportunity for us to continue the work that we have been doing for so long, which is to create a just society fully inclusive of immigrants. Y esta es una gran oportunidad para nosotros para asegurar que podamos tener esa oportunidad, ¿verdad? Que ya hemos estado haciendo bastante trabajo sobre asegurar que haya una sociedad justa que incluya a los inmigrantes. I think most of you are members, as I see a lot of you here. So during my presentation, I'm going to step into Spanish and English to make it fully bilingual. But I'm really excited for all of you for today to meet one of California's redistricting commissioners for the state of California, Sarah Sadhwani. We're very excited about her presence here today. And then I want to let a lot of you know that Sarah has a long history with CHIRLA and also with working with many immigrant rights organizations across the state of California and also supporting social justice causes. So we're so excited to have her here with us today. Estoy muy agradecida también para que todos están aquí con nosotros. Y para nosotros es un placer también tener la presentación hoy de una de las comisionadas del Estado de California para la redistribución de distritos en el Estado de California. Para aquellos que no la conozcan, Sarah Sadhwani es una persona que está muy familiarizada y conoce muy bien íntimamente el trabajo de CHIRLA, pero también ha trabajado con muchas organizaciones por inmigrantes, por la justicia social, a través de todo el estado de California. Entonces es un gran placer hoy que nos va a dar ella como comisionada información sobre este proceso de redistribución de distritos. As you guys know, redistricting work is actually a continuation of our census campaign. And so today, as we're hosting this educational training, it's to provide an understanding around the next steps following our complete count work. In 2020, CHIRLA launched the Contamos Contigo campaign. Many of you were part of it to empower Latinos, immigrants, refugees, and English learners who had a history of being invisible in the census. And so we worked together, all of you, many of you here worked together to make sure that census form was filled and that we had a fair and accurate count. Quiero dejarles saber que este trabajo sobre la redistribución de distritos es una continuación de la campaña de censo y es la campaña que muchos de ustedes participaron en esta campaña, ayudándonos a asegurar que nuestra comunidad participara. Es parte de este trabajo ahora. En 2020, CHIRLA lanzó la campaña Contamos Contigo, y esta es una campaña, ¿verdad? Fue una campaña para empoderar a los latinos, a los inmigrantes, a los refugiados y a todas las personas que su idioma no es inglés. Y también que por muchos, en otras décadas, son invisibles en el conteo del censo, pero por su trabajo pudimos asegurar de que hubiera más equidad y que también estuviera más conciso el conteo del censo. And also, I just want to remind you guys that it was a really, really hard census campaign. The 2020 census campaign had a lot of obstacles, including a failed bid by President Trump to include a citizenship question in the census. But we worked on this and we made sure that we fought him in court, making sure that every person who is living in this country, as per our Constitution, was counted in the census. Y también lo que pasó en el censo del 2020 fue que el conteo fue un conteo, ¿verdad?, muy diferente a otros, porque había muchos obstáculos y ataques por parte del presidente Donald Trump para asegurar que nosotros no fuéramos contados, incluyendo agregándole queriendo agregarle una pregunta de ciudadanía en el censo, pero nosotros lo peleamos en las cortes y ganamos para asegurar que hubiera el conteo de nuestra gente. Entonces, ahora es tan importante que nosotros entendamos cuál es el próximo paso. Nos contamos y ahora, ¿qué pasa? Bueno, al que la gente sea contada, este conteo va a definir qué sigue después. So what comes next? We had a very successful 2020 census campaign in which we ensured our community was counted. Well, what happens next after that count occurs? This is where we then decide and work to have fair representation based on the census and based on our ability to be counted. And certainly for the immigrant community, we don't want to be invisible. Ahora que ya hicimos todo el trabajo sobre el censo, asegurándonos que nos fuéramos a contar, ahora ¿qué ocurre? Pues que ahora vamos a ver cuántas personas viven en cada distrito y definir y distribuir esos distritos basados en el conteo de las personas. Y nosotros no queremos ser invisibles en ese conteo, especialmente en la comunidad inmigrante, con documentos o sin documentos. And then, you know, this is an effort for all of us to be engaged. This is democracy. This is about every single one of us participating in the democratic process, which is to be counted and to be represented and to be fairly represented. So today we're going to learn about this redistricting process. We want to make sure as the decision-making process moves forward, we want to make sure that in this process of decision-making, our voices are heard, that we're present, that we're learning about how important it is, because at the end of the day, who represents you makes all the difference in terms of the issues that matter to us, on housing, on immigration, on education, on healthcare. So it's important that we ensure not only are we counted, but we are represented according to our numbers, and that those who represent us reflect our community. Ahora, ¿verdad? En este momento vamos a aprender hoy sobre la redistribución de distritos. Y esto importa bastante porque esto es sobre la representación en un proceso democrático. Somos contados ahora después, dependiendo en la población, los números de esa población, se redistribuyen los distritos y quién nos va a representar. Y eso importa tanto porque queremos asegurar que las personas que nos representen pues realmente entiendan nuestras necesidades en vivienda, en inmigración, en educación y en todas las otras cosas que nos importan también, como en el cuidado de salud. De esto se trata hoy, así que estoy muy agradecido que tomaron este día de su sábado para estar aquí con nosotros, para aprender este proceso democrático dentro de nuestra nación y para toda nuestra comunidad inmigrante, hacerles entender que nosotros también contamos, sin papeles o con papeles. And I'm so thankful for you today for joining us in this redistricting educational series, because what matters is that we participate in this democratic process. And I'm so thankful that you took time of this Saturday morning to learn more about the redistricting process and how we can have a say in the decision-making of many of our commissioners who are going to draw up these districts based on the population. And our hope is that our voice will make a difference and will create districts and representatives that that really care about us and see us. We're not invisible, we're here. Y queremos asegurar que cuando se definan estas líneas de estos distritos, estos representantes nos vean, que no somos invisibles, aquí estamos y necesitamos que nos representen. Y con eso le paso la palabra una vez más a Karen Diaz. And with that, I just want to pass it over now again to Karen Diaz to continue with our program today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angélica. Gracias, Angélica. Compañeros, gracias por acompañarnos este sábado. Sé que muchos de ustedes acaban de estar acompañándonos. Esta presentación va a ser solamente en inglés, pero les estamos ofreciendo traducción. Quiero otra vez dar las instrucciones para cómo puedan escuchar la presentación en español. En este punto en adelante, la comisionada Sadhwani, que nos está acompañando el día de hoy, va a darla en inglés. Zoila va a estar ofreciendo la traducción, quiero asegurarme que les doy los pasos otra vez más. Voy a enseñarles mi pantalla para que ustedes puedan ver qué tan fácil es seleccionar el lenguaje de español. Si necesitan ayuda en esto, pueden preguntarle a su organizador o a Raquel, que nos está acompañando si no tienen su organizador presente el día de hoy. El primer paso es que si están conectados desde su teléfono, le van a tener que dar selección a los 3 puntos en la parte de abajo, a donde le ponen mute o seleccionan si encienden su cámara o no. Estos 3 puntos en su iPhone o en su teléfono Android les van a dar una opción de que donde eligen a los emojis o eligen a mandarle mensajes por el chat, van a seleccionar la opción de abajo donde dice Language Interpretation. Esto va a asegurarse que ustedes tengan acceso al lenguaje de español. Eso si están en un iPhone. Si están en un teléfono Android, va a tener un globito. Entonces les va a ser más fácil ver esto. Si ustedes están conectados desde su computadora, no tienen que hacer este paso extra de darle clic a los 3 puntitos, sino que en la misma barra donde tienen para quitarse de mute y poner la cámara, va a haber un globito y solo le van a dar en el globito. Una vez que estemos en este paso, le vamos a seleccionar español y para que no estén escuchando los 2 lenguajes al mismo tiempo, le van a seleccionar a donde dice New Original Audio. Esto va a asegurarse que solo estén escuchando un solo lenguaje. En este momento, Zoila me comunicó que nadie está en pero quiero asegurarme que todas las personas que hablan español tienen acceso a este servicio. Si tienen preguntas, las vamos a estar respondiendo en el chat para asistirlos en lo que seguimos con la presentación. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos. Otra vez, para seleccionar la interpretación hay un globito abajo o en su teléfono los 3 puntos. Language Interpretation es el siguiente paso y le seleccionan en la palabra Spanish para español y darle silencio al audio original para solo escuchar uno de los 2 lenguajes. Okay. Y con eso voy a continuar con la presentación. And thank you so much for your patience to those of you that are only speaking English. We just want to make sure that everyone is able to hear this really important information. And with that, I just want to go ahead and welcome Commissioner Sarah Sadhwani. She has been working as an assistant professor in politics from Pomona College, specializing in American politics, racial and ethnic politics, and public policy. Her research has been published in peer-reviewed journals for political behavior, California Journal of Politics and Policy, and the Journal of Race and Ethics and Politics. We're so glad that she's joining us here today. Professor Sadhwani earned her doctorate degree in political science from the University of Southern California and her bachelor's degree in philosophy from the University of Pittsburgh. Prior to working in academia, Professor Sadhwani dedicated a decade advocating for immigrant rights at social justice organizations. She actually got her start here at CHIRLA as a volunteer. And she also was a former CHIRLA staffer, and she also worked in other organizations like Asian Americans Advancing Justice, the California Immigrant Policy Center, and she's a registered Democrat. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'll go ahead and pass on the word to you.
Before I get started, I see someone had a hand raised. Should we? I don't know how you want to handle those.
Thank you. María, ¿tiene alguna pregunta que le podamos responder rápidamente? Está en mute, no la podemos escuchar.
Sí, no pude presionar el globito para español.
Para seleccionar el globito, ¿tiene alguien en la casa que le pueda ayudar a seleccionar a dónde está el globito? ¿Está en su teléfono usted?
Sí, estoy en mi teléfono.
Ok, si está en su teléfono, tiene 3 puntos donde le puede quitar el mute, le da a seleccionar Language Interpretation a palabra, selecciona español y de ahí le da mute Original Audio. Si necesita más ayuda, me puede mandar un mensaje a mí privado y yo le puedo ayudar.
Ok, está bien.
Okay. All right, great. Well, I will go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. It is so great to be back here at CHIRLA. As Karen had said, this is really where I got my start in Los Angeles and working in the social justice movement. Thank you so much for having me and for inviting the commission to present today. Again, my name is Sarah Sadhwani, and I'm one of 14 commissioners selected to draw the new electoral district lines following the 2020 census. I'm going to walk us through our redistricting basics presentation today. We're going to go over who the commission is, what we do, and also how you can get involved. As Angelica said, your involvement is so important to this process. So we want to certainly leave you with lots of ideas of ways that folks can get involved. Before I begin the formal presentation, I'll just share a little bit about myself and why I chose to apply to be on the commission. As was said, I'm a political scientist now by training, but have worked in social justice issues for many years, working in communities of color. And in immigrant rights. I came to CHIRLA in 2006, right during the time of the La Gran Marcha, the big marches in Los Angeles, fighting for immigration reform. I'm myself am the daughter of immigrants. My father was from India, my mom is from England, my husband is an immigrant. So the immigrant experience is certainly something that has always been very important to me, and ensuring that all of our voices can be heard in democracy. And so it's so exciting to see so many people logged in on a Saturday morning. So thank you for that. And then again, my apologies, because after 15 years here in Los Angeles, my Spanish is still not great. So thank you for bearing with me and with the translation and interpretation. I really appreciate that. And if at any point from an interpretation standpoint, if you need me to slow down, please just wave a hand and I'm happy to do that. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, it actually says I cannot share my screen. Sorry about that.
Let me give you access real quick.
Perfect, thanks.
Raquel, I think you're the only one that can give her access. Can you go ahead and give access to Sarah, Raquel, please? I don't have access to doing that.
Okay.
Can you help us give access to Sarah so she can share her screen? She doesn't have sharing privileges and I can't do it.
Yeah, give me a second.
Okay, thank you. En lo que esperamos, ¿hay alguien más que necesita ayuda para la traducción para que demos las instrucciones otra vez?
Oh,
No?
there we go.
Okay.
Okay. Are you all seeing that now? Yeah, okay, perfect. Great, so I will go ahead and get started. So again, thank you so much for having me. Just a quick reminder for today. We are strictly, as commissioners, we're strictly forbidden from taking public comment outside of a regularly scheduled commission meeting or an official public input meeting. This is for transparency purposes. Any information that we receive about the community's interest in redistricting, we have to make sure is done in a public way so that anyone else can hear that also. However, you're at any point, you're more than welcome to come visit our website and to provide that kind of input. And also, we're going to be talking more today about different ways that you can get involved and provide that input. So just as that reminder, I'm not going to be taking any information about where you would want to see lines drawn or anything like that, but instead we'll just talk generally about the redistricting process. Okay. So first of all, what is redistricting? We're really trying hard to make redistricting sexy, but it's pretty challenging. Not a lot of people know about what redistricting is. For a very long time, redistricting was kept out of the public eye in many ways. The public was not involved. And so we're trying to find ways to engage more people, like these public outreach sessions today. Redistricting is defined as drawing new boundaries that determine which Californians are represented by each elected official. Okay, so that's like a technical definition of what redistricting is. It's actually going through and redrawing the lines. So why do we have to redraw those lines? Every 10 years, of course, we go through a census to get a count of all of the people in the United States. And with that count, we're also finding out where people live. And so it's important to note that a lot of changes happen over the course of 10 years. Communities change, right? Priorities, interests, goals, things that are of interest to the community changes over the course of 10 years. People are born, people die, people move within California. They also move into and out of California. Communities therefore grow or they shrink. And so in the areas where there was roughly the same number of people 10 years ago, a district might end up becoming unequal today. Okay, so these are some of the reasons why we have to engage in a redistricting process every 10 years. Okay, because ultimately, as the communities change, districts need to be updated in order to reflect those changes. And one of the greatest powers that the people of California have is to elect their own representatives to conduct the business of their government. How the district boundaries are configured can make a huge difference between empowering and maximizing voters' voices or minimizing and muting our voices. In most other states, politicians redraw districts, and often they end up drawing safe districts for themselves to allow them to stay in office. So in most other states, there's not a commission. Typically, it's the state legislature themselves redrawing the lines for themselves so that they can then run again in those districts. Over the course of many years, many decades, redistricting has been used at times to exclude communities from political power. And we're gonna talk about how that's done. By fully participating in and monitoring the upcoming redistricting process, more communities have the opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. So speaking up about your community is absolutely critical to help keep your community together to the extent possible. This ensures that your voice is heard by your elected officials when making decisions such as the quality and funding of your child's education or determining your tax rates. Your input is valuable in shaping those new political boundaries. And so that's why we're really here today to get folks ready for that process. how redistricting affects you. We thought it would be helpful and beneficial just to break down a little bit more about how redistricting can affect you directly. So power to the people. So the Voters First Act was historic in California because it transferred the power of drawing district maps away from politicians and instead gave that power to the people. Championing your issues, having the opportunity to elect representatives that champion your issues is so important in a state like California, because California is a really large and diverse place, right? The issues of importance can vary drastically from one neighborhood to another, from one street to another. In Northern California, you might have people championing environmental and economic issues. In Central California, in the Central Valley, you might have people championing water and agricultural issues. And in Southern California, you might have people championing issues dealing with transportation, housing, employment, immigration, right? So throughout the state, in different regions, different communities might prioritize different issues. And so it's therefore it's really important to have to have a say in the redistricting process. My apologies, my little one is here next to me and wanted to say hi to everyone. You want to say hi really quickly, Isla? There you go. All right. Why don't you use that? It's not too loud. Sorry about that. Saturday morning childcare is always a challenge. Excuse me. Funding priorities tied to all of the issues that you're most concerned about. There are elected representatives that are going to champion your issues, and you might want to elect representatives that have your financial interests at heart. When the time comes to build a budget, you'll want a representative fighting to ensure your community gets the financial resources it deserves, right? For various services like education, water, healthcare, fire protection, earthquakes, right? So there's a lot of funding initiatives that go into a state budget, and you're going to want to make sure that the people that are elected to office to create those budgets have your best interests at heart. And finally, community boundaries. The redistricting process is all about drawing lines and determining which communities are going to get grouped together into districts. Your input in this process is essential to help the commissioners understand where your community starts and where it ends. Redistricting in California is one of the few civic activities that any Californian can provide input into regarding their community that ultimately impacts the law and regulations, tax structure, how funding is distributed, and which services are provided. The road to fair representation. The US Constitution requires that every American receive as close to equal representation as possible in government. As populations of districts change over time, it can leave some people overrepresented and other communities underrepresented in government. So redistricting is the opportunity to even out the population between districts, right? That's kind of the essential reason why we engage in redistricting. After the federal government publishes updated census information, and we'll talk a little bit more about the delays in the census later, California must redraw the boundaries of its congressional, state Senate, state assembly, and state board of equalization districts so that the districts correctly reflect the latest count of the state's population. Redistricting is based on the idea that each of our voices should be represented fairly by creating districts that have the same number of people. The census results are used to draw those new maps every 10 years to account for the ways that populations have changed and moved across the states and districts. At the federal level, reapportionment takes place to reallocate US House seats among the states. This too is done after each national census to ensure that seats are held by the states in proportion to the size of their population. Currently, California has 53 House seats, that's members of Congress, we might also call them. That might change after we get updated census numbers. There's a lot of, many believe that the total population of the state of California has declined over the last 10 years, and that we might actually lose at least one seat in Congress, which means another state would probably pick up another seat. Historically, legislators have drawn maps that allow them to choose their voters rather than enabling voters to choose their representatives. This former system undermined the concept of fair representation, which is to give people the power to choose their representatives. Okay. Why independent redistricting matters. So we've talked about how redistricting affects you, and now we'll explain a little bit about why independent redistricting matters. Democracy depends on voters having the opportunities to choose their representatives. When elected officials redraw the lines of their own districts, they get to design their own territory and choose who their voters are. This slide highlights key terms in redistricting to help you understand why it's important to delegate the power of redistricting to the people. Gerrymandering is a term you've probably heard, and that happens when the election district boundaries are drawn in a way that gives a particular set of people, like a political party or a racial group, an unfair political advantage over another. This graph shows how in a jurisdiction with 50 people, 60% are orange and 40% are purple, whatever those groups might be, 5 different districts can be drawn in multiple ways, but it's not always fair. The first 2 examples show 2 ways to draw district lines in a fair manner, where the districts are drawn to reflect the population. The 2 examples on the far right, however, show ways to draw district maps in a manner that does not reflect the population, which is referred to as gerrymandering. This is why independent commissions like California's commission were created, to remove the politics from the process and instead really focus on the people. Mm-hmm. Sorry about that. Okay. So for the commission, we have to follow a number of key criteria in this order, in fact. So the state laws are very specific about the kinds of criteria that we have to use. This is not the case in other states. So you might hear, and Angelica was talking about earlier, fights over whether or not all people will be counted when it comes to the census, as well as to redistricting. So we're very fortunate here in California to have very clear guidance on what the key criteria have to be. And that guidance includes, first and foremost, that districts must be of nearly equal population, and that's to be in compliance with the US Constitution. Secondly, districts must comply with the Voting Rights Act. To ensure that minority communities have a fair opportunity to elect representatives of their choice. We can talk more about that if there's interest. Number 3, districts must be drawn contiguously so that all parts of the district are actually connected to each other. So we can't have a district that kind of ends and then also has another piece over there, unless it's perhaps an island or something. Number 4, districts must minimize the division of cities, counties, neighborhoods, and communities of interest to the extent possible. In some regards, it's almost impossible to keep, for example, the entire city of Los Angeles into one district for House representation. So of course, there will be times when cities are going to have to be broken up into multiple districts. But to the extent possible, keeping cities and neighborhoods together. Number 5, districts should be geographically compact such that nearby areas of population are not bypassed for more distant populations. This requirement refers to the density of the population, not necessarily the shape. So when it comes to redrawing lines, you'll often find districts that look funny, right? That they're not a perfect square, for example. And that's okay, that's pretty normal. But in general, keeping the communities together. And then finally, where practicable, each state Senate district should be comprised of 2 complete and adjacent assembly districts. In other words, those assembly districts should be nested inside of a Senate district if it's possible to do so. Okay, and the Board of Equalization district should be comprised of 10 complete and adjacent state Senate districts. Okay. In addition, there's also restrictions in addition to these criteria that place the residence of any incumbent or political candidate cannot be taken into consideration in the creation of the map. So we can't go out and think about, okay, who's the legislator here, where do they live, and will they still be in this district when we redraw it? We actually try to remove as much of those kinds of political considerations as possible, and we won't be looking at where current incumbents live at all. So that we don't favor or discriminate against any particular incumbent. Okay. Different redistricting efforts. This is an important one. We are one of many redistricting efforts occurring in California. So the commission is redrawing districts for state offices. At the same time, you'll hear about localized redistricting efforts at the county level, city level, school districts, water districts, and even community college districts. So there's a lot of redistricting going on throughout the state. But we wanted to bring your attention to this because different efforts are happening all at the same time. And so it can sometimes be a little confusing. You might say, well, I've already provided testimony about where my community lies, but you might have done it, for example, for the city of Los Angeles and not necessarily for the state commission. So aside from being involved in the state redistricting process, we also encourage you to be involved in local redistricting efforts because they have similar importance to your community. A little bit about the history here. Prior to 2010, legislators in California drew the lines. And if the legislature failed to properly draw the lines, the courts would step in and draw the lines. This is actually still the process for most states in the United States, where the state legislature retains the power to draw those lines, and typically doing so in a way that is self-interested, right, to support their own next election and being elected back to office. In 2008, California voters passed Prop 11, the Voters First Act, authorizing the creation of an independent commission to draw new district lines for the state Senate, state assembly, and the Board of Equalization. In 2010, Proposition 20, the Voters First Act for Congress, added the responsibility of drawing congressional districts to the commission. Our goal as a commission is to spread the word that the people's role did not end with being counted in the census, and to collect valuable community input to assist us in the process of drawing new districts. The 2010 Redistricting Commission was California's first independent commission. The 2020 Redistricting Commission is building upon their work and will leave behind detailed documents to assist the 2030 Commission when they perform their duties. Other states with independent commissions include Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Michigan, Montana, and the state of Washington. Okay. Talk a little bit about the commissioner selection process. The commissioners all went through a rigorous application process that attracted over 20,000 applicants back in 2019. After an initial review, over 2,000 individuals completed a supplemental application. So that required writing essays, having letters of recommendation. I was very thankful and happy that Angelica had actually provided one of my letters of recommendation, as well as public comments from folks throughout the state. It was a very thorough and public review of all of the applicants. The list was dwindled down to 120 applicants, 40 Democrats, 40 Republicans, and 40 independents or people with no party preference. And they were invited to interview, from which 60 were chosen to be presented to the legislature. The California legislature was allowed to remove no more than 24 candidates from consideration, leaving a total of 36. The first 8 members were then selected through a public drawing in July of 2020. And that was actually where I was selected through a ping pong ball process. So it's a truly random selection based on that list of 36. The final 6 members were then carefully selected by the first 8 commissioners in August of 2020, taking several considerations into account, including political party, geography, race, gender, and also expertise. Okay. So you can see a little bit more about who we all are. This is the 2020 commission. We're a 14-member commission made up of 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, and 4 members who are not affiliated with either of the 2 major political parties. You are welcome to visit our website and learn a little bit more about each of the commissioners. All of them have, excuse me, their bios on our website. The commissioners are diverse in terms of the geography that we represent, as well as in terms of our opinions and expertise. There are 7 from Northern California, 7 from the Southern California region. 8 of the commissioners, that's the majority, are women, 6 are men, and we range in age from our 30s to our 60s. Among us, there are NGO leaders, of community-based organizations. There are engineers, pastors, law enforcement officials, political scientists. That's me, a lawyer, and public servants as well. Please feel free to join us at any of our commission meetings. They're all held online due to COVID-19, so they're all available virtually. There's a link for attending on our website, and we are actively working on trying to get them all translated into various languages. And certainly if there's requests to have interpretation, please do let us know. We would just ask that you notify the commission 5 business days prior to a meeting to request interpreter services. The commission is attempting to contract an interpreter and will attempt to contract interpreters in any language requested. Okay. Some of our duties after these education sessions, the commission will hold public meetings and accept public input to assist it in drawing the new electoral maps. The commission will draw maps for 4 different government bodies. For Congress, probably, as I said before, about 50 or so congressional districts, 40 state Senate districts, 80 state assembly districts, and 4 Board of Equalization districts. So we definitely have our work cut out for us. We've used an example from Sacramento to demonstrate what the different maps could look like for each of the different district types. And you'll see here also that the number of people, the population is different in each of these district types. So those are the kinds of considerations that we'll have to do. So of course, some communities will ultimately might be together in a congressional district or a state Senate district, but might be cut into 2 different assembly districts, for example. Okay. Right now, from February to May, we're conducting these presentations, these redistricting basics presentations, to educate the public about the redistricting process. I should also note, though, that this presentation, these slides are available on our website, and you are welcome to take them and go and educate others in your community as well. You can request, however, a commissioner or a staff member to come out like I'm doing today, but you're also welcome to take these slides and use them to help educate others. We've also divided the state into 11 outreach zones, A through K, to better manage our outreach efforts and to build relationships with communities on the ground. We're eager to engage with all communities. We're more than happy to set up redistricting basics presentations with any group that requests one. So, there's any group from any, any affiliation or anything like that, we're happy to come out and be available. We plan to have this presentation also available as a video in case groups just would prefer that option, and you can just play the video during your meetings, okay, or refer back to it if you'd like. I want to talk a little bit about communities of interest. As you might recall, one of our criteria is to keep communities of interest together to the extent possible. So we can obtain the city and county information and know where the city and county boundaries already lie. But what we need are the communities of interest information from you all, right? From Californians. Communities of interest are defined as a concentrated population which shares common social and economic interests that should be included within a single district for purposes of its effective and fair representation. So examples could include areas in which the people all share similar living standards. Everyone has a similar culture or speaks a similar language. It could be a community of interest based on everyone using the same transportation facilities, right? This area is served particularly by buses, for example, or people have similar work opportunities or have access to the same media markets. People can belong to multiple communities of interest. And keep that in mind, that a community of interest is not the same as a district, but instead they're the key building blocks of a district. So you could describe your community as geographic, right? It could be like you're based on a waterway, right? You're focused on a river or access to certain kinds of water. It could be that it's a rural community or an urban community or a mountain-based community. You could have specific boundaries for your community of interest. So you could come and tell us, my city needs to be kept together. And this is why, right? It could be based on school districts and ensuring that school districts stay together. It could also just be that your community has something in common, right? Some kind of cultural component that keeps it together, or various kinds of economic opportunities that keep the community together. And that's why the commission should be aware of it, to make sure that you can stay together. And because we need this information, your input is vital to the success of the commission. We've identified the ways that you can participate in 3 simple steps. First, you can describe your community. Tell us about where your community is. Okay, what are your shared interests? What brings you as a community together? What is important to your community? Right? Are there nearby areas you would want to keep within a district? Right? Are there nearby areas that you don't want to be in a district with? And then tell us why, right? Share why it is that you feel like your community is separate from this other one. So you can describe that. And in the future, we're going to be having community input sessions where you can actually come in and just share with us, verbally where your community is and why it should be kept together. You can also draw your community on a map, and we have a tool that I'll talk about in just a minute, where you could actually go through and map out where your community lies. And you can send your testimony directly to the commission. You can email us or send a letter at any point in time. And we are happy to receive that. And we will make that information also public. Okay. So all of this can be done using an online tool that allows you to describe, draw, and send your input to the commission. And you can visit this tool at drawmycacommunity.org. So it's right down here. The website is available here. And this is a mapping tool and allows you to put in some information about why your community should be kept together. And that tool is actually up and available already for folks, and we've already begun receiving maps from communities to show us where their community of interest lies. So you are welcome to go in and kind of play with the tool, figure it out, and it's pretty easy to use and user friendly. And so you're welcome to go ahead and do that even starting today. Okay. You can provide public input to the commission in several ways, including submitting your input through that mapping tool, which we call our community of interest mapping tool. By visiting our website at redrawthelinesca.org, or by emailing us or sending us traditional mail. We're open and ready to receive all of those kinds of comments. Okay. COVID-19 has delayed many things, including our ability to access census data to help us draw district maps. I know that you all and CHIRLA were very involved in ensuring a complete census count, and we thank you so much for that. But on February 12th, the Census Bureau announced that it would deliver redistricting data to all states by September 30th, 2021. In a normal year, we would anticipate receiving census data on April 1st. So you can see there's a long delay here in receiving the data. Originally, we were anticipating receiving it by July 31st. Which the Supreme Court in the state of California said that if we received it by July 31st, we could extend our deadline to December 15th to finish drawing those district lines. We're working right now with the legislature, with the Secretary of State, with other key stakeholders to minimize the impact of the delay on the 2022 elections. But I think notably, it's highly likely that we will go past December 15th to draw the lines. Ultimately, the timeline will have to be extended. So just in terms of that timeline right now, we are actively doing these presentations to help educate communities on the ground about what redistricting is and why it's important. From June to October, we intend to hold a host of public input meetings to collect that information about communities of interest. So at that point in time, we'll be quiet and ask that you all come and tell us where your community lies and why it should be kept together when it comes to redistricting. We anticipate that the census data will be received in the state September 30th, but it'll take about a month to process. We've supported initiatives such as prisoner reallocation to ensure that individuals who are currently in state facilities are actually counted from redistricting purposes in their home address as opposed to in the address where they currently reside. So that'll take a little bit of time to prepare the data. And then we anticipate November, December, and probably moving into January and possibly even February to actually conduct the line drawing, to come back to the communities after we've drawn an initial map, to get further input, right? So that you can tell us what we did right and what we got wrong, and that we'll have some time to also make the best possible maps that we can. Okay, so that's about it. Please, as a reminder, I'm happy to take questions and move into a Q&A period. But just as a reminder, I cannot take any information about where your community of interest actually lies today. You are welcome to send that to us through our website. All of that information that you send us will actually be posted to our website, so that there's full transparency of our process to make sure that no group is getting unfair access to commissioners. So that is certainly something that's very important to us. But happy to take questions about the general components of redistricting. And just as a reminder, also you can follow us on social media. We're conducting educational sessions like those today, and certainly available to do additional workshops for other groups that you might be a part of. You can simply request a presentation through our website. And that's it for me. So thank you so much. I so appreciate you all taking the time to learn a little bit more about redistricting and the basics, and why it's so important for you all to, for all Californians really, to be involved. And I'm happy to take any questions that folks might have.
Thank you, Sarah, so much for sharing this really important information with us today. And for as we open it up for the Q&A, I'm gonna go ahead and start speaking on folks to ask your question. Please say your name, the region that you're coming from. This is a statewide educational meeting, so we just want to show Sarah the diversity of where our community lives. And I'm gonna go ahead and get started with the question that was asked on the chat earlier. It says, thank you, Commissioner Sadhwani. How can community members request language translation? Is there a number or email that they will need to call if they plan to attend?
That is a great question. We are working on all of our translation and interpretation services at this point in time. I think they can contact Marcy Kaplan, who was on the final slide there. Her email and phone number is actually available. They can send an email request there. We also take any public comment. So you can also just contact our general info email line and request interpreter services.
Para los que están, yo voy a dar la traducción para las respuestas en este momento. So, si necesitan ayuda para pedir traducción, siempre nos pueden decir a nosotros. Yo soy la encargada de ayudar a facilitar la participación en estos eventos, pero también vamos a compartir el email de Mercy Kaplan, que es la coordinadora de Outreach. Angelica, I saw that you had a question, and I'll pass it on to you.
Sure. No, I just wanted to ask if just for us, so we could see how the lines are drawn today, and that way we can compare as to how they would be drawn later. Is there a place where you can actually guide us to resources to just see how those lines are drawn today? Mi pregunta era sobre, obviamente hoy tenemos el estado de California está dividido en distritos, donde podemos ver esos distritos como están diseñados hoy, para de esa manera comparar con lo que quisiéramos en el futuro.
Thank you, Angelica. That is such a great question. Certainly the current maps are available. If you on a quick Google search, I don't think that we have them actually on our website yet. So that is a great suggestion. And we certainly should have them up there. There are a number of resources in general, not necessarily ones that the Commission has put out yet, but looking at changes in population by district. For example, Naleo Education Fund did an excellent presentation for us looking at Latino majority minority districts in particular, and VRA protected districts, those districts protected by the Voting Rights Act. I don't believe we have a lot of that well documented on our website. So I will certainly work on that. We've had a number of excellent presentations during our public meetings, in which other groups and organizations that are concerned with redistricting are doing excellent analysis. But I don't think we have it synthesized on our website. So we will work on that. Thank you for that suggestion.
Para la respuesta que dio la comisionada Sara, dijo que no hay un recurso en el sitio de su website que les compartí hace unos momentos, pero van a trabajar en incluir esa información. I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you, Andrea,
Thank
for
you.
your question.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, Sarah, my question, first of all, I'm sorry. I should say I'm calling from the San Gabriel Valley area, which is Assembly District 48 specifically. And when you're talking about redistricting for the incarcerated communities, which address, you said home address, do you use to, or what defines the home address? Is it the address that is given by the person that's incarcerated, or does it go by like a state ID, or does it go by voter registration card?
That's a great question. I believe it goes by the address that was given when the person became incarcerated. So the statewide database, which is the official redistricting database for the state of California, and is housed at UC Berkeley Law School, has actively been working with the state prison system to get the list of all of the folks that are incarcerated currently, and to get to the addresses that they have listed for them. In some instances, those addresses are a little bit older, or were not complete. And so they've been working closely with the state corrections officers to try to clean up that list as best as possible, so that when we get that data, those individuals can be put back into their communities. In some instances, my understanding, I haven't seen the list itself. There are some privacy issues there, of course. So in some instances, my understanding is that there wasn't a complete address, and so they're going to randomize kind of the general area where they'll put that individual back into their community. But the intention there is really ensuring that folks who are incarcerated, the idea behind it is really that they'll get the best kind of representation in their home districts, where they would otherwise reside. And so that's really the impetus, the reason for pulling folks back to their home addresses for redistricting.
Thank you. I appreciate your answer.
Yeah.
La pregunta que fue hecha era de dónde se van a contar las poblaciones que están en prisiones en este momento. Y lo que respondió la comisionada Sara fue que las personas que están en la prisión, hay un sistema de data que está en la Universidad de UC Berkeley, la Universidad de Estudios de Leyes. Ellos tienen la información de todas las personas que están en las prisiones, pero esto solo es al nivel estatal. Y ellos van a ser contados o van a ser tomados en consideración en su domicilio de donde pusieron antes de que empezaron a estar en las prisiones. Veo que tenemos una pregunta de Myron, si quiere quitarse de mute, o Myron, if you want to go ahead and take yourself off mute and ask the question first.
Sí, gracias, comisionada. ¿Sí me escuchan? Gracias, comisionada Sara. La pregunta es, ¿cómo la comisión de redistrito va a tomar en consideración las voces de las personas que no tienen casa? Hay mucha comunidad sin vivienda ahora en California. Hay mucha gente que le dicen homeless. ¿Cómo ustedes se van a asegurar que las opiniones de estas personas sean consideradas a la hora de hacer las líneas de distrito?
So I think that the question was about how do we consider people who are experiencing homelessness, is that correct?
Yes, their opinions.
Yes, exactly. So I guess two sides to that. In terms of the census work that was done, the census is meant to capture people where they are living, technically on April 1st, but during the time of the census. So hopefully, and I know that there was certainly a robust outreach to people experiencing homelessness. Of course, that is a huge issue here in Los Angeles. So they hopefully have all been counted in the census data, right? And with some kind of location associated with it. So hopefully we will, when we receive the census data, it will be an accurate reflection of those experiencing homelessness. Of course, we can anticipate that there might be people that have been missed, and certainly things will change also over time. But ultimately we'll use that census data. In terms of opinions, we're happy to receive input from folks experiencing homelessness or advocates who work with them. I believe we haven't taken on this issue yet as a discussion topic for the commission, but I believe some of my colleagues are working actually on an education panel and discussion for the commission. So throughout these many months, we've been having panels on a host of issues. So we've already talked about incarcerated communities, we've which I've shared with you, but we've also done panels specifically on communities who don't speak English very well or will need translation interpretation, not only in Spanish, but of course in the multitude of other languages. We've had panels on business interests as it relates to redistricting, on environmental considerations and environmental justice considerations. We have not had one yet on people experiencing homelessness, but my understanding is one of my colleagues is preparing one for the very near future. So while I don't have a great response for you yet, it's certainly something that we are aware of and trying to plan for to ensure that we have a robust outreach. I think you're absolutely right to raise the issue of homelessness. It's an area where we certainly need greater representation to ensure that these challenges are being met by our elected officials. So
para responder la pregunta de homelessness y cómo van a ser contados, la comisionada dijo que la comisión espera que toda la información de la población que está sin hogar o homeless ha sido contada de una manera justa cuando se llenó el censo 2020, pero aparte de eso, parte del trabajo que hace la comisión es que toma clases educativas. Ha tomado clases educativas sobre el medio ambiente, cómo hablar y prepararse para tener conversaciones con poblaciones como la de nosotros que son que usan otros lenguajes. Pero algo que les falta hacer es tener información y presentación de cómo hablar con las presentaciones, con las comunidades que no tienen hogares. Entonces eso es algo que van a hacer en el futuro, pero ya lo tienen planeado en su horario para seguir aprendiendo sobre eso. Does anyone else have any questions so that I can pass it on to you, to somebody else?
Yes, this is Melody. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Sarah, for being here with us today. And thank you for the Civic Engagement team for putting this space together. I really appreciate it. My name is Melody. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm in the North Hills community, State Assembly District 46. And I have two questions for you today, Sarah, since I have you here already, and I would love to hear your responses. So the first one I have is, I know that folks are sending y'all feedback from all over the state, and they're as engaging as the folks on this call. So could you talk a little bit about the process of ensuring that you get to all the questions? Is that a guarantee that folks will get all their questions answered, or are they filtered? How does that move forward?
Sure. Thank you so much, Melody. And is the question, how do we answer everyone's questions, or how do we ensure that we see everyone's public input?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. Just ensuring that everyone gets their concerns, answered and everything. That would be great for me to know.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, I think that we're going to do the very best that we possibly can. And so we're 14 commissioners, so that's a significant amount of capacity and time that we can dedicate to it. But we also have full-time staff members who are available as well. So, you know, if there are questions, concerns, a desire for presentations, we're doing our very best to make ourselves as available as possible. I think you know, certainly I can't speak for my other colleagues on the commission, but I think in general, the sentiment of everyone on the commission has been that we want this to be an open and engaging process. We want for other folks to feel like they can be involved in the process and that they can have their voices heard. So that's really one of the core, you know, values for us in this process. In terms of in hearing everyone's comments, so for example, I mentioned already, people are sending their community of interest maps, etc. We're actually working to develop a whole data management section of our staffing so that as we're receiving inputs and submissions, that we have staff prepared to ensure that we are actually seeing all of them. So our intention is, for example, to have a data analyst layer all of the communities of interest maps that we receive so we can see where the overlap is, for example, and also areas that may or may not be considered by some groups or others. So we're going to do our very best. And at the end of the day, one of the problems is that a line will have to be drawn somewhere. And so ultimately, not everyone will be happy with whatever we produce. You know, especially in a state the size of California, we could redraw the state a million different ways. And I can't imagine that there's any one perfect map that would make every single Californian happy. But we're going to do the very best that we can to make sure that we're hearing everyone. And ultimately, we will have to weigh, you know, some of the pros and cons of keeping some communities together and not others. But I feel confident that, you know, in a 14-member commission with folks from all over the state with diverse opinions and backgrounds, that we'll be able to weigh those pros and cons in an equitable and fair way.
And before we go into the next question, let me just give a quick translation to folks. So, para la pregunta que hizo Melody es cómo se va a asegurar la comisión que escucha los comentarios, las opiniones de todas las personas del estado de California. La respuesta fue que es un estado muy grande y vamos a hacer lo mejor que podemos, dijo la comisión, para tomar en cuenta todas las opiniones de todos los que están presentes. Van a contratar a una persona que va a estar encargada de que todos los comentarios que se dan se ponen en un sistema de data para que se tomen en consideración, que se escuche todas las voces de todos ustedes. También tienen personas que son parte de la comisión que son contratadas, personal que trabaja, y ellos toman preguntas y respuestas, o si tienen cualquier pregunta acerca de algo o comentario, pueden contactar a la comisión. Nosotros podemos facilitar esa participación y eso es parte de nuestros siguientes pasos trabajando con ustedes. Primero es la educación y responder preguntas, y de ahí vamos a estar en contacto con ellos para darles nuestro comentario público. Okay. Go ahead, Melody, if you can also translate your question.
Yeah. Yes, of course. And yeah, just really quickly, I know we're running out of time. I did get another question from one of our members that I want to ask on behalf of them. So they're asking, how will communities in detention center facilities how will they be considered in the map drawing?
Yeah, unfortunately, we are able to get the information for those individuals in California state prisons. So that does not include folks in federal detention centers, unfortunately, or in federal prison. It's definitely something we have a couple commissioners who are looking into this matter a little bit more closely to see if there's anything else that we can do. But ultimately, individuals who are in federal prisons, including detention centers, are not always, we're not necessarily captured in the census as living in California. So people tend to move. People from Arizona might be in detention from here in California, or Californians might be moved to other states as well. So it becomes a very tricky data management question of how we can actually account for those folks in their home home communities. I can say certainly this issue was raised by commissioners. There is a strong desire, I believe, amongst the commission to also account for folks in detention or in federal prisons. But I think the challenge is actually because of this movement. I'm not sure that we'll be able to do it.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
You're so welcome. Thank you for that question.
Para traducir la pregunta rápidamente, lo que dijo Melody es que en cómo se van a tomar en consideración las poblaciones que están en los centros de detenciones. La respuesta a eso fue que ahorita no hay manera de que las poblaciones que están en centros de detenciones o en prisiones federales que se cuenten en California, o ellos no fueron contados en el censo en el estado de California porque algunas veces se mueven entre estados. Tal vez las personas que están en Arizona vienen a California, de las de California las mueven a otros estados en Arizona. So, esa es una de las conversaciones que la comisión está tratando de responder, pero se sienten apasionados acerca de tratar de resolver este problema. Pero es más allá de lo que ellos pueden hacer. Esto tal vez necesita legislación, como por ejemplo con la prisión del estado, se pasó una ley para que esas poblaciones fueran contadas en sus domicilios de donde viven, no en el lugar donde está la prisión. Este es un punto de oportunidad de advocacia para nosotros. Y viendo que ya son las 11:25, lo voy a abrir para una pregunta más. Para una persona que tenga una pregunta más. So does anyone have any more questions? We're nearing 11:25, so I just want to make sure that we have enough time to answer one last question. Tal vez si no es una pregunta, algún comentario de algo que les pasó interesante o algo que le gustaría que hubiera dado más información. Or maybe if you don't have a question, maybe you have a comment about something that you really liked in the presentation or something that you would have liked to have more information about, so we can work with you to make sure we answer those questions and provide you more details. Ok, viendo que no hay ninguna pregunta o comentarios, quiero terminar esta presentación solo diciéndole a todos que gracias por venir, pero eso solo es el primer paso. Llenamos el censo, nos contamos, sacamos el voto en el 2020 y eso nos dio más poder político, pero este proceso va a definir nuestra comunidad por los siguientes 20 años. So, I know that what we did is we got started with knocking on doors last year, all throughout 2020. We make sure that we got everyone in our community counted, even through a pandemic. And now we are, learning about the redistricting process. And this is going to define our communities for the next 10 years. So, como los siguientes pasos para nosotros, si hoy aprendimos acerca del proceso de redistribución de distritos, ahora hablemosle a un familiar, a un amigo y contémosles qué es lo que aprendimos. Una vez que hacemos eso y si tenemos preguntas, háganlas a nosotros. Tienen al equipo del trabajo cívico, a Zoila, a mí, a Raquel, para aprender. Tienen a sus organizadores. Y como siguiente paso es aprender cómo vamos a dar nuestro testimonio público. Queremos que todos ustedes nos cuenten qué es su comunidad. Yo les puedo hablar de la comunidad de Foundel todo el día, pero ustedes son los expertos en su comunidad en Los Ángeles, en el Antílope Valle, en el Valle Central, en Sacramento. Tenemos miembros de muchas áreas. So first, we make sure that we learn today, and everything that we take today and that we learn today, let's make sure that we tell a friend, a family member, what was the thing that you like? What was it that you learned? And if you have any questions, you have our civic engagement team here ready to learn and teach you whatever you need. As next steps, we're going to be learning how to give our public testimony. This period is going to be starting in May all the way to October. And then the final lines and maps are going to be drawn. And then we can give our final testimony in support of this map if this uplifts our community and our power. So thank you so much for joining us. Gracias por acompañarnos. Y solo le quiero pedir a todos que si pueden dar un aplauso a Sara por acompañarnos el día de hoy. So if everyone wants to join us and just take yourself off mute and just thank her for joining us today. We really appreciate her being here.
Woo!
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be back at CHIRLA.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Gracias por su tiempo.
Thank you all. Have a good rest of your day. Gracias. Pasen un buen feliz fin de semana.
Gracias. Cuídense. Bye bye. Thank you.